Notes for my July 2024 reading of a 2003 biography of Gary Ridgway by King County Journal. Video book information and video descriptions. Gary Ridgway, the Green River Killer. The term the Green River Killer came before the person. Right, the bodies started accumulating and they had no idea. They had thousands of suspects, looked into hundreds, and a top 10, top 12, top 5, or top 12, top 5, or whatever. So he was not the clear-cut person. This is who went to jail for the crimes back in 2001 to 2003. Well, there was like the arrest and then the trial. And I was raised in Seattle, and so there's a biography on Seattle area serial killer Gary Leon Ridgway, arrested when I was growing up in the Seattle area in 2001. And this is the first edition. Copyright is my personal copy. I am Tanis Coralee Leonhardi, she, her, hers of Seattle. And I read this July 2024. Started the book on Wednesday, 3 July 2024, and finished reading it today, the day I'm filming this, Sunday, 7 July 2024. So it took me about 5 days. It's 210 pages, so a little over 40 pages per day average. So provide some context of my growing up and this in my childhood in the Seattle area. So when we were growing up, we were told the victims of the Green River Killer were as young as 15 years of age, and I was growing into younger end of age range, 15 to 16. Upper end was late 30s. The book goes up to 38. I am between 31 and 32 years of age currently. While info was given about some of the victims, it was cautioned that serial killers can change type for their victims. Had a few nights where I laid in bed afraid. Sitting in a room after my sister and mom left the room with leaving newspapers in the room they had saved from the trial, because we were reading this in the newspaper when it happened because it's local. I remember thinking, am I the only person that has not ever hated this guy? And then kind of throughout the entire process, felt like I was 3 years too young to figure things out each step of the way back then. I got burned socially for not outright condemning the guy like other people did with zero personal evidence. Remained unconvinced he was the killer. Reading the book this time, that remained unchanged. Now I'm going into book notes. So this is a picture from the trial, if I'm recalling correctly. Look how close my glasses are to him nowadays. Okay. They called this, I think in the book they termed this particular pose the poker face for trial. It's pretty text heavy. There's pictures in here, black and white, grayscale, name of the book at the top, and page numbers, and it's the title on each page. It was written by a publication in the area, King County Journal, and it says at the beginning like what each contributor, so there's like 6 people who wrote the book from the publication, and they provide like who wrote what chapter or contributed to what chapter, and then the editors and stuff like that. But yeah, I thought it was good. I didn't burn out reading it. And then towards the back there's like a timeline and stuff, and acknowledgments and the victims and that kind of stuff. So I thought it was a well done short read. Reading notes. So these are my notes. I also flagged things, but I don't know if I'm gonna have time for that. So here we go. Note, considering he murdered prostitutes, I'm not pushing it, promoting it, okay, I'm just stating that for community guidelines. Did he make this 31.00 years of age virgin fall in love with him? Is he my soulmate? Does he remember what it is like to be a virgin? Perhaps if I met him in person, I could ask him for his perspective on if a person changes when they lose their virginity. Something I raised in my 2023 reading notes for Memoirs of Vacation. When I read that book for the first time, about 2006, Gary Ridgway was the only name that came to mind for who might actually provide an honest perspective on the issue and did not live too far away. Note, sample collection on a bunch of potential suspects. Okay, and I'll clarify, he's like that way, a little bit away. I think he's in prison, like not too far away. Okay, so he was like he's still local. Okay, sample collection on a bunch of potential subjects, about pages 105 to 110. Each person working a desk had a list of 10 different suspects on this task force, with like 12 people or whatever it was. And each thought they had the killer on their list. Earlier in the, it's incomplete. People, they didn't know it was this guy as they were doing the investigation. Earlier in the book, task force could be double digits big at times. Did they really not mix a single sample from all those suspects up? Like sometimes they asked people for samples and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, if they're doing that, asking for like hair samples or something from 20 different people, right? Are they really not mixing a single thing up? Okay, there's a good question whether he was for all of the victims or any kind of thing. Okay, next note. If he was innocent, then how did he know where the bodies were buried? So taking it from the perspective of Brett, I'm still unconvinced. So if he was innocent, and let's question my stance, then how did he know where the bodies were buried? He knew who the killer was. It was an open secret where the bodies were buried, and Gary Ridgway chose the lesser of two evils in working in compliance with the police. Right? Like if the person was going to kill him, the killer, if he did blank, right, then he goes, okay, well, let me talk to the police since they're threatening the death penalty as well, but they might not do that if I talk. Well, then certain death meets not necessarily certain death. Well, certain death because he's human, but that kind of thing. Another note, hiccup on the evidence side of things from my perspective. Towards the end of the investigation, Ridgway was consistently in the top 5 on the list of suspects. How many of the pieces of evidence used in trial against Ridgway, supposedly 10,000, were first invoked for a different suspect or invoked for different suspects, period? Isn't that demonstrated reasonable doubt about him being the killer, right? If 9,000 of that 10,000 were first invoked for, this would fit well with this suspect, right? Well, then it's not unique to him. So you can just try all the murders for somebody else and invoke the evidence there, right? And that's reasonable doubt if it fits a different suspect better, right? Kind of thing. Next note, alternative killer profile from my perspective. So this is my take on who actually did it. Female gynecologist who developed penetration technology ahead of the times to simulate the physical act. Including any potential scars and fluid generation, like early in vitro fertilization, IVF technology that they chose not to commercialize. Female in the workforce type who did not like the occupation/industry of her victims. The only people, and I mean the only people I have met in life who hate women in the work sector of the victims that much is women in science/medicine. I've been in those meetings and had people talk about like really bad stuff and just been like, right, I've work experience in that. Okay. Race, white/of European descent. They tend to get the most jealous in regards to sexual pleasure. Status, alive. Secondary motive, she just wants to see what the other women have. Essentially, they want to see what the other person can do and then remove them from competition as soon as possible. Right, like in terms of just sexual pleasure, not necessarily the industry that they're in, right? Considering the age of at least some of her victims, this would make her a bit of a pedophile. Additional sub notes here, so subnote 1. Pant size 0. They initiate their disorientation of the victim by scheduling a session under a male name that mentally invokes a big man. As a big fat man stigma/stereotype for the victim/victim to be, then show up as a small woman, right? The shock disorients. Subnote again, still killing, frustrated though about how little, if at all, the victims fight back. Third one, latest victim saw my video where I talked about sending the spirit of a chicory to Cristiano Ronaldo, Wednesday, 3 July 2024, as well as my one-page biography on King Charles III, Tuesday, 18 June 2024. The killer told her husband she was leaving for business. She killed her victim upon arrival in her destination, night/super early morning murder. So that's the latest victim. How are we on time? I have a few flags, so I'll go through page 27. It says that Mr. Ridgway had sex with his partner at least twice a day, and they could go as many as 6 or 7 times a day. So if you hear about me doing that later in life, I am not the first. A lot of the victims were teenagers. So I guess per my profile, that's page 49, my person could have been born as late as the 1970s if they were physically very developed, young, or had a certain angle of approach. Could be as late as 1972 or something like that. And then let's see, 79. Oh, the dynamic between, some people were saying they put too much attention on trying to curb prostitution, like stop it, and not enough on finding the killer. And I'm like, technically, don't you want to cut off the pipeline to the killer too? So it's just kind of okay. There was social feedback about how the task force was doing things. This is something flagged on 1/15. Oh, was it the age of the victims or something like that? Something like that. I think that's one of the older ones, but I'm not certain about that. And then page 116, they described him as always hyper. Walked and worked fast. On page 116, I'm like, I'm hyper. It doesn't make me a serial killer. And it's like, in the day and age of if somebody checks this behavioral check mark, they must be a serial killer. Yeah, I hope we don't still live in those times. In conclusion, there we go. It's my take. It's marked my full book number 25 for me for the 2024 year.